Hello, this is Lauren Gross. In this video is for my Geography 110 class with my partner is Dr. Anesli Netsinji, who sadly cannot be a part of this presentation just because at the time of me making it he was away at a research conference and I didn't want to rush him nor the project when he returned. So though I'd like to thank him for his help in not only Alright, so to begin my presentation, again, this is about Sri Lankan agriculture, specifically the use of animal products in the food and commodity markets. You'll also see the Sri Lankan flag, and also we'll just cover some basic general info about Sri Lanka. Well, Sri Lanka, to start off, is located, as you can see on the map, it's that island on the southern tip of India. So it's an island nation. It does have a lot of influence from India. There is roughly a little bit over 20 million people currently. The religions in descending order of popularity are Buddhism, Islam, Catholicism, and Hinduism as the primary ones. The country was originally Hindist, and then more Islamic travelers came in during the Age of Exploration and set up on the island for spice and good trade, and then the Portuguese came in and brought Catholicism. And with these two influences, as well as Buddhism coming from the mainland through the Chinese, Sri Lanka actually pulled away from Hinduism, and Buddhism won out for a developing country. The population, though, was largely susceptible to foodborne illness and waterborne illness, just because of the lack of safety implements in progress. Animal byproducts and crop production. The main animal byproduct in crop production here is animal manure for fertilizer. The main source being the water buffalo. Animal manure is very cheap. It's very readily available for them. They have to do something with it. They can't just lay all these piles of animal dung around and they put it in their fields. This also has to go with Buddhist and Hindus mentalities of reincarnation and samsara and universal energy. It is a natural product coming from animals, so to put it back into the earth and give it into other beings, the plants, you're promoting the universal energy through it, and it's a lot more socially acceptable than the chemicals and artificial components, as you can see down here. The reason being just because chemicals and artificial components, first off, are a lot more expensive. They're not as readily available in this country. Farmers just wouldn't be able to buy large enough quantities to get the discounted prices because first off they don't have the money, second off they don't need that much, and it's just not socially. Dung is used, a little bit of chicken litter, a little bit of pork sludge, but for the most part it's just water buffalo manure. Bone, blood, and fish meal are used to add some nutrients such as phosphorus, nitrogen, sulfur, and some of the trace minerals back into the soil, so depleted. Animals used in the production of crops. The water buffalo is the most prevalent in the picture. You see a small herd of water buffalo, and the lighter ones actually being water buffalo Brahman cattle crosses. That animal, they're a lot like a dog. You'll find donkeys, oxen, and horses in the country from time to time working in the fields, but not as prevalent. Why is that? These animals, water buffalo, are bred and raised in this part of the world. They're native. They thrive in, and the other animals just don't. And it's not for their health. They don't have the parasite disease resistance. They're not acclimated for these environments. So the water buffalo, with its docile nature and its adaptations, is best for working these areas, whether it actually is plowing or carrying of the crop. Now, elephants can be found as well, relatively frequently, but when you think about it, it's really not that much. But considering the rest of the world doesn't really use elephants, it's quite a bit. The thing though is, if I would explain this to you, the water buffalo is basically your little, it's your tiller, it's a weed eater, it's a light loader, it's kind of like a lawn tractor, while your elephant is your heavy equipment, your bulldozers. Exactly as what it does. It clears out forests for rice paddies and stuff, and moves far larger crop amounts when there's a huge harvest, or large amounts out of relatively inaccessible areas. So machinery is not used as much because there's not a lot of money for capital in this area, as well as just the societal um, negative views towards it. So machinery is not really used, and animal use in production of the crops is pretty high, though machinery is on the rise. The cultural implications, again, people cannot afford mechanization or synthetic products for food production. People do not necessarily want to use the modern technology, and they find it healthier and better for the country, sustainability, and for the people to use these animal byproducts and use the actual animals. Um, a lot of the world is turning back to doing this, so they're just a step ahead of the game by never changing from it. 30.5% of the population directly involved in agriculture. This is a bit of a decline from 1995, when it was 36.8%, and that's just because the population is getting older. The younger population isn't necessarily as interested and is more technology driven. So that's one thing the society is going to have to face, is when the society is so heavily involved in agriculture, as it modernizes, production has to go up in order to meet the societal demands. Mechanization that is more accessible and socially acceptable, but again, the society as a whole is more receptive of using animal byproducts. The slow decline, again, modernization is occurring. It's not necessarily seen, though, as socially unacceptable to use this, just because it's on such a small scale that it's not negative for the environment. It actually is positive for the environment to do it like this, because you don't have that much waste being thrown back into the environment, so the environment can actually cope with it. It naturally restores the environment back to what it was, which is good. Um, you know, rather than have synthetic and chemical waste, you have natural product being put into the environment that's naturally going to degrade, naturally be integrated. And since it's not overdone, there's not excess, there's not runoff, and you actually run into the environment being enriched. Such now, rice and tea production, these are the two highest commodities produced in this country. Three main crop commodities produced in this country are rice, tea, and then coconut. These two being the highest. On your left you see a picture of some water buffalo working a rice paddy, and on the right you see a picture of actually a tea plantation on a hillside. As you see, the water buffalo, man plowing, very, very manual work. The swampy conditions is not somewhere a lot of mechanization can actually take place. Okay, the water buffalo, as well as fertilizing the field, are working the field, and they'll later be used to harvest the field. And the same can be said for this hillside over here. The animals are a part of this agriculture. There's probably somewhere in there some bone meal, some fish meal, and some different additives being added to soil to improve the overall quality for production. Okay, this is the way people have done it, this is the way people are going to keep doing it, and this is the way it's done, just because of the country. As you can tell, that man doesn't look very necessarily wealthy, just because of the relatively crude plow he's using. It's what people have to do. And the thing is, rice is so important in this country. Every person, so per capita, on average, eats 256 pounds of rice per year in this country. They're the world's largest exporter of coconuts. The tea, as you see here, they send a lot of tea to what would be to us the Far East, but so Eastern and Southeastern Asia, the Orient, and they have done so because they use manures from these water buffalo, which actually work very well with the tea and the rice, because the rice paddies, basically little ponds where they grow rice, are able to, through the water cycle, through the nitrogen fixation the bacteria were found within, able to constantly recycle that manure waste and reuse it. And then on these hills, due to the way tea is grown on hills, there's heavier fertilization on the top of the hill than there's on the bottom. So when it does rain, the heavy excesses go down the hill and go towards the bottom without necessarily bogging up on the bottom of the hill or running off, in order that everything gets fertilized equally. Alright, a recap of everything we just talked about real quick. Sri Lanka, island country, South India. Huge use of animal byproduct resources, and which include animal labor for crop and commodity production. Okay, it's huge. Okay, and the reason mainly being, to sum it all up, both societal outlook as well as environmental impact. They don't have to worry about runoff of chemicals, artificial hormones, none of that in their actual food supply as far as crop is concerned, and actually animal, to be honest with you, but they produce a lot more crop than they do animal just because of their land available. And religious doctrine has a heavy emphasis on plant-based diets as opposed to meat-based diets. So, keeping all of that in mind necessarily, you know that it's better for the environment just because it's on smaller scale, it's natural, the environment takes it back in, and there's really no negative effects because it's not like here where you have thousands upon thousands of acres worth of manure produced by feedlots or other commodity producing situations where you're left with a bunch of waste and runoff. There it's on smaller scales. Basically the 2 water buffalo you have to work your field are the 2 also fertilizing your field. So it works out quite well. Now, next is a little game activity. I was going to have animal products to the commodity matching. I threw some commodities in there, specifically that would be found in Sri Lanka as well as some in America, just kind of get that bridge gap going. Now, the commodities are lipstick, eyeliner, and shimmer makeup, raspberry flavoring, natural nematode inhibitor in soils, honey, calcium pills, natural pH balancer for soil, and iron supplements. Byproducts that would be found in these, and the goal is to match these up: bee saliva and vomit, mushroom sand and water buffalo manure, oyster shells and animal bones, fish scales and animal fat, urine in the crystallized form, blood, and anal scent gland extract from a beaver. Now I'll give you a second to possibly think, pause the video if you want to try to play this game yourself and figure out what exactly goes together. So, honey obviously is made from bee saliva and bee vomit. Bees eat nectar, spit it back up, store it, it's honey. Yay, vomit. Natural nematode inhibitor in soil is the mushroom found in water buffalo manure. These mushrooms found in water buffalo manure can actually be put back in the soil to fight the nematodes and various fungus to keep both disease down and actually help the plants grow better without competition. And they work better actually than chemicals because it takes longer for the nematodes to become resistant. Go figure. Next we have oyster shells and animal bones, and those used for calcium pill supplements, mainly oyster shells, believe it or not, just because animal bones a lot of times are frowned upon. And so next we have fish scales and animal fats, a huge piece of lipstick, eyeliner, and shimmer makeup in the Western world. Yep, girls, all that glittery stuff in your makeup more than likely is fish scales. It just shines that way in the light. It's easy to get a hold of. Well, you know, it happens. Natural pH balancer for the soil, urea is a crystalline version of urine, and it's used in the soil as a pH balancer as well as a nutrient enhancer. It's used here, used in Sri Lanka as well. Blood is an iron supplement for soil and people. For people, not as much in this country, but in Sri Lanka, they still eat blood, sausage, and blood product more commonly. So it's an iron supplement, a protein supplement, as opposed to actual meat. And the final one, the anal scent gland extract of a beaver, is used for making natural raspberry flavoring. It is natural, it is not artificial. So most things you see in raspberry flavored actually are made from the anal scent gland of a beaver. Wow, huh? Think that tastes like raspberries. And that's considered natural. So it gives you a whole new idea on what food labeling can be, but that's a whole nother presentation. So my references are Dr. Nestle Nitsinja in the WKU Ag Department. He really was helpful with this and pointed me in the right direction. The USDA website to find the Sri Lankan USDA website. The Sri Lankan USDA website was a lot of demographic data, as well as most of these photos in the presentation. While this next website was a Sri Lankan agriculture research site, which backed a lot of the info I found as far as the importance and use of these different animal products and commodities. So thank you. That is my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it.